Hi, I'm Rob Davies. This afternoon we're talking about classic motorcycles. For the last 20 years I've been writing articles for magazines, travel, history and all kinds of other stuff. But for the last 5 years I've been writing for Classic Motorcycle and Classic Bike Guide, two magazines which are quite popular in the UK. Also, about 3 years ago I published Custom Rides, a book which has some of the most wonderful custom bikes from around the world, and the book is doing really quite well. But for YouTube, what I really want to do is look at classic motorcycles, essentially from the years 1940 through to about 1990. I'd like to do all kinds of classic motorcycles, BSAs, Triumphs, Japanese bikes too, and I really want to talk to the guys who've restored motorcycles, because I want to look at restorations, reviews, walkarounds, and then take them for a ride. I know some great guys from all over the Midlands who've got some excellent and fascinating motorcycles. What I'm going to do today is, my first bike is the Honda Nighthawk. Now the Honda Nighthawk is a US import, so it wasn't in this country naturally, and this one has come over from America. So let's have a look at the Nighthawk, let's do a walk around and see exactly what we've got, because this essentially is an underrated Japanese classic. So the Honda Nighthawk, built between 1980 and 85, and there's quite a lot of a difference between the early models and the later models. The early models were of course chain drive, whereas this later one is shaft, and the later one here, the 1985, has the double overhead camshaft. It's a fabulous machine, it's comfortable, so let's have a look at the features. As I just mentioned, it has a shaft drive, and Honda made here quite an attractive, neat shaft drive. It's one of the later ones with the 4 K-hin carburetors, one of the last of the carburetor driven models, and we have the alternator underneath. If we just have a look at the instrumentation, we have a square clock. The original of course did have a square headlight, but that was replaced some time ago with a round one, which it looks much neater. On the clock we have some useful stuff. We have the speedo and tachometer. We also have a fuel gauge and a gear indicator. Idiot lights just below. The nice thing about the Honda Nighthawk, and Honda generally, is the quality of the build. You can see the quality of the build essentially when you look at things like the foot hangers here and the footrests. Everything is built with attention to detail. Up on the handlebars we have really nice handlebar clamps, and the switch gear is particularly nice too. Now let's just have a wander around. It's got the 2 disc brakes at the front, and you can tell that it's an old bike because there's no perforations in the discs, but the brakes on this really work quite well. So I'll just wander around now, taking in the front, and we'll do the offside. Honda of course always did the same kind of horns for most of their machines, whether it's CBX or the Honda 250s. Now you may have noticed that this engine is just like the CBX 750. In fact, it's pretty much identical to the CBX 750, but of course the other one's a larger bore. I think that's enough for a walk around. Let's have a listen to the engine. Turn on with the key, press the button. There's a little bit of cam chain rattle when the engine's cold, but when the engine's warmed up that completely disappears. The double overhead cam has automatic valve lifters, so there's no noise coming from the top of this engine as with tappets. They're all hydraulically done, which makes for a smooth and quiet engine. I think the best thing to do now is take you for a ride. The Nighthawk has 6 gears, and as you can see from the clocks in front of me, we're in 4th gear. The petrol gauge is extremely useful. It's got 7 bars at the moment, so we've almost got a full tank. We're doing just over 2,000 revs and 30 miles an hour. I know, however, that on this the clock is a little bit underneath, so when this clock's reading 30, I know that I'm actually doing 35 and I'm doing 40. But that's only just one of the failings. You have to remember this is a 1985 motorcycle. It's not been restored. It's just as it's basically came out of the showroom. The seating position is nice and relaxed. It's upright. It's sit up and beg, as some people say. But the seat's comfortable and the handlebars are just about right. So if you're not looking for cafe racer style, then the Nighthawk is an absolutely beautiful bike to take out for a spin. As you can see, the mirrors are wonderful. You've got a good view left and right. And as far as safety is concerned, the headlights and rear lights come on this automatically, so you're riding with a dipped main beam during the daytime. I think this is an excellent feature and ought to be included on all bikes. Of course, it was there on American bikes in the past, but not so much here. I think if you want to ride safely, then you certainly want running lights. The trouble is, these days there's so many people willing to pull out in front of you, but if you have a good headlight on, then that's got to be a good safe thing. I'm leaving Dudley behind and heading for Kings Winford. The clutch on the Nighthawk is hydraulic and it's beautifully smooth, as it is the front brake. The bike has 66 gears, and the brake horsepower on the Nighthawk is 63. Now, compared to a lot of bikes these days, 63 doesn't seem a lot, but this bike in 2nd or 3rd gear, if you take it above 6,000 revs, really does go. It's capable of just over the ton, which is 100 miles an hour. You could sit on the motorway on this bike at 70 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour all day long, if you could stand the wind, that is. It's one of 3 bikes that I've got, and as I said, I've owned this for 5 years, and to be perfectly honest with you, I would never sell this. It's smooth, it's comfortable, and as with all Hondas, it never lets you down. If I want to go somewhere, whether it's 5 miles or whether it's 100 miles, I know that this bike is going to get me there. But that's Honda quality for you. But over the next few months, I hope to ride all kinds of classic motorcycles, VSAs, Triumphs, Aerials, the whole lot. As you can see, 45 on the clock means I'm doing 50 at the moment. I better slow down. I'm now on the A449 heading out of the West Midlands and heading towards the Stupony and then Bridge North. The countryside around here is really quite beautiful. Often these days when people are talking about motorcycles, they're talking about prices, and over the last 20 years classic motorcycles, of course, have not only held their price but gone up in price. 5 years ago I paid £1,500 for the Nighthawk, and now I'm guessing it's got to be worth at least a few £100 more than that. The thing is that this bike is totally undervalued and unappreciated. If you're looking for one in the UK, I doubt if you'll find one as good as this. There may be 2 or 3 good examples in the country, but of course the earlier ones with the single overhead cam and chain driven gear are nowhere near as nice as the 1984 and 1985 bikes. Looking down at the clocks at the moment, I'm in OD, which it doesn't say you've got 6 gear, but OD is overdrive, so you've got 1 to 5. The bike is of course a inline 4-cylinder, 650cc, 63 brake horsepower, and that's quite plenty for the A and B roads in the UK. The BBC said that we were going to have bright intervals this afternoon. It's now 2:45, and I don't think I've seen a bright interval yet, though there's lighter looking skies over in the west to where I'm heading. The Nighthawk is extremely smooth. When it revs past 6,000 it's got a throaty roar, but the engine, as you can hear, is very quiet indeed. And you start thinking of comparing this, I mean, okay, it's as a generation really it's 10 years later than your 650 Bonnevilles and your A10 Super Rockets, but in many ways they just don't compare with this 650. But it's 4 carburetors and 9.5 to 1 compression ratio. If you go out with 650 Bonnevilles and Super Rockets, all you'll see of them is a little blur in your rear view mirror. In my last book, Custom Rides, which came out 3 years ago, I covered some really beautiful bikes from all over the world, from Taiwan to Germany, France, and of course the UK too. A good friend of mine built an absolutely beautiful cafe racer. If you remember the Suzuki GT 750, well, I had one of those in the day. I think it was about 1972, and I had the A model. Well, Martin took one of the old GT 750s and turned it into an absolutely gorgeous cafe racer. I'll see if I can put a picture of that overhead for you. Just turning left into Endville Common Road now and heading back towards Dudley, and let's go through the gears and the sound of the Honda Nighthawk. The fuel tank only holds about 2.5 gallons, and this gave me a problem as I brought it back from Bournemouth back to the Midlands. I had to do 180 miles, and I followed my wife back in the car, and I had to fill up twice on the way back. So the fuel tank looks quite huge, but actually isn't. Earlier on I was talking about build quality, and the Nighthawk does have really nice build qualities. Take a look, for example, at the reservoirs for the front brake and the clutch. They're matching, they're metal, none of these little modern plastic little pots that vibrate away and look completely cheap. But there is a thing cheap on this motorcycle. Right the way from the wing mirrors right the way through to the tail light. So, in conclusion, the 650 Honda Nighthawk is a real underrated classic Japanese machine. With 4 valves per cylinder and double overhead cam, it has plenty of acceleration and makes a great cruising machine. How fast is it? Last week I set it against my pal's Triumph fuel injected 675 triple. We pushed both bikes to the limit, and at the end of a 2-mile dual carriageway we were neck and neck. My pal was so upset he went home and wept, literally. And the triple has something like 93 brake horsepower. Yes, in 1985 the Nighthawk was the fastest 650 on the road, but it's much more than that, because if you like the retro feel of the 70s and 80s motorcycles, it is rather beautiful too. As some wise person wrote on the internet, it is Honda's best kept secret. However, they are rare in the UK, especially a good one. BSA Gold Stars are much easier to find. Yet D&K in Stoke-on-Trent and Freddy the Fat Frog in Worcester are importing good Japanese bikes all the time. I've just checked eBay UK and there is just one for sale, and that's been sweetly butchered into a so-called flat tracker scrambler. And the guy is asking £3,250. So I wish you all the best.